who is here, but the basic overview of what we're going to do is going to be the same. We're going to analyze these county projections in the same way that we analyze the state projections. First, looking at a population overview to see how the county compares to the overall state in terms of population dynamics that we think are important for population growth and decline. Then look at how we're projecting the total population to grow through 2050, how births, deaths, and migration contribute to that growth or decline for the county. And then population pyramids and race ethnicity examinations to see how the population composition, not just the number, is changing, to see in particular aging that we're seeing across the state, how it's impacting a particular county, as well as how changing diversity is impacting the county as well. So this is from Morrow County, of course. In comparison, Morrow County as of the 2020 census had a population count of 12,186. And the population who is aged less than 18 was estimated to be 27.4%. That's a bit younger than the overall state population of Oregon. And the population who is age 65 plus was 16%. And again, that's lower than the 18.6% that we have for the state of Oregon. So Morrow County itself is a bit younger than the state overall. The population who is non-white is considerably higher than the state of Oregon overall, 43.7% compared to 25.9%. And the persons per household is a bit higher at 2.55 compared to the 2.31 that we see in Oregon as a whole. There's more people per household than we have for the whole of Oregon. Moving on to the population projections, we expect Morrow's population to continue increasing over time, and pretty at a slower rate over time, but pretty comparable from what we saw over the past census 10-year census period. So from 2000 to 2000 to 2000 or 2010 to 2020 rather, the count of the population grew from 11.17 thousand to about 12.2 thousand for a 9% increase between the last two censuses. And you can see that in the jump right here on the left-hand side of the dotted line, and everything on the right-hand side of this dotted line represents forecast. And so we're expecting increases in the population to continue, albeit at a slightly slower rate than what we saw in the past. In comparison, here in the dotted lines is our projections in the last cycle that we did. So you can see that we overestimated the population by a slight bit, but nevertheless, we anticipate about the same amount of growth moving forward through 2050. So then where is this coming from in terms of births, deaths, and migration? We expect births to continue to decline, and this is mirroring a trend that we see across the state, although we think it will stabilize to some degree over time. And we think this is happening because TFR will continue to decline. The total fertility rate, this is the average expected number of children that a woman would have throughout her life. We expect the difference between what was observed in Morrow County and Oregon County to get smaller over time, but for Morrow still to have a slightly higher total fertility rate than the whole of Oregon. In terms of deaths, we saw a big increase in the last 5-year period, in part driven by COVID-19, and we expect deaths to continue to increase over time, although this isn't really driven by a change in a decline in health. We expect life expectancy to increase over time at a similar rate that has been observed at the state overall. The increase in number of deaths is mostly coming from an aging population, a pattern that we're seeing across the state, and which we'll examine later in the slide deck. In terms of migration numbers, compared to the last cycle, estimates for migration numbers were expecting quite a bit more migrants coming into Morrow County, and that's because of recent trends in migration, where we saw higher than average migrants coming in over the last year, 5-year period, of about 50 people migrating in per year, and we expect a similar contribution in the years moving forward. And that contribution is happening in younger ages and middle working age and older working age populations as well. Oh, yep, there we go. The population pyramid structure of Morrow County resembles other counties' patterns pretty similarly in terms of the way that we're expecting it to grow over time. So starting from 1970, we can see that the population is fairly small and pretty young, with the bulk of the biggest generation being the boomer generation, aged 10 to 20 years old at the time in 1970. But we expect this to change over time, and we're showing the change through the census periods to 1990, 2000, 2010 to 2020. And by 2020, the boomer generation is still representing a sizable portion of the population, albeit smaller than they were before. And we have now Gen Z population being the largest generation. So a little bit different from other counties in that while other counties aged at a considerable rate, there's still this pattern of a bit of young populations representing a large portion within Morrow County. However, that we have seen drop-offs in the last 10 years in the number of births, which is reflected in the lower populations age 0 to 10 in this declining fertility rate for the county. And so moving into the forecast years, we expect a bit of that to continue with declining fertility rates. But relative to the rest of the population, we expect Morrow County to be a bit younger and still to continue to grow over time. Like most other counties, we saw a big increase in the percentage of the population who is age 65 and older. That is the population who is eligible for retirement. Between 2010 and 2020, looking at census data, we saw a 4 percentage point increase in the population who is age 65 plus. And we expect that to continue a bit as especially the boomer generation starts to get older, a quick increase, and then a leveling off in the increase until we have about less than a quarter of the population, a little bit less than a quarter of the population expected to be age 65 plus. And this is still younger than what we're anticipating for the whole of the state of Oregon, but still seeing a general pattern of aging among the population. We anticipate that Morrow will continue to diversify. Here we have the population growth of Morrow County broken down by race and ethnicity by the 6 categories that we're using. And here we see that white population has declined rather between 2000 and 2020 over the census periods, and considerable growth has happened in the Hispanic population during this time period, and we're projecting that to continue to happen through 2050. So again, past this dotted line is our projections, and we're expecting increases in the Hispanic population. Another way of looking at this is by examining the total percentage that each population represents. And we're expecting by 2040, for there to be a majority and minority population where no one group will have more than 50%, will represent more than 50% of the total population. So increasing, and this is mostly driven by increasing Hispanic populations, but also slight increases in American Indian, Alaska Native, API, and Black populations as well. And that leaves us with just a few minutes for questions and comments before we go to the next one. But yeah, open to hearing anything or feedback that you might want to say. Oh, Karen, if you're trying to talk, I think you're muted. Oh,
Yeah.
there we
So
go.
part where we talk about housing, and that's usually the part we try to say that we're doing more.
Yeah. Yeah, so the housing meeting will come in late February, early March, and that's part of the next cycle. But these numbers are important because they give the population sort of what's the word that I'm looking for? The main population for the county determines how much each of the cities can grow, right? So like what we're seeing at the county acts as like the barometer for what we're anticipating for the cities. And so like these numbers, especially in terms of like the total population numbers, are pretty important for what we're looking at. And so compared to the last cycle, we're about 1% higher, 1 to 1.5% higher, a bigger population than what we forecasted last time. So we're expecting Morrow to continue to grow in this regard, which leaves a little bit about a comparable 1% more flexibility in terms of like the housing and the growth for the UGBs as well, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
So I think in that regard, you can expect more of the same, if not slightly higher than last time that we made these forecasts. And the reason we do this is because for a lot of counties, again, like the changes were pretty dramatic with the updates that came with the 2020 census. But in terms of our forecast, last time that we did this which was before the 2020 census, and what the 2020 census provided in terms of an estimate for the population, we were pretty on the mark, in terms of like estimating that. So we feel pretty confident about like the growth that's coming in the coming years. The big caveat there being though, is that we do expect, population aging to occur. Greater, and this is just a trend that we're seeing across the state, right? People are having fewer kids, people are living longer lives. So the population who is post-retirement age is going to become bigger and bigger relative to the total population. And that's another thing that we just want to make sure is on the minds of people as well.
Well, and I know that we've always been a younger population area.
Definitely.
I mean, we could use that when we were looking for grants and things like that. So,
and relative to the state, we expect that to continue, right? It's just that everyone in the state is shifting slowly, a bit more. Yeah. And then the other big one too, in terms of differences from what we did last time, is this forecasting by, race and ethnicity. And here we've captured, we talked about it in previous cycles, growth of different groups, but we never made the forecast. And so here we're also breaking this down with expected continued growth of the Hispanic population as well. Yeah. And this goes in line with forecasts that we're providing for DLCD for equity targets in the future, but we're also incorporating into our county forecast right now as well.
Well, they're part of our workforce for sure. So that we keep growing. So that's great.
Yep, definitely. I will make sure to ping Carla and Tori about this to make sure that they get both the slides. I've already sent the slides to Carla, but I'll send them to Tori as well, and then let them know when the recordings are up so that they have access to this.
Yes, Tori answered me and said, yeah, she would like to have that she couldn't attend right now.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next presentation, and thank you for being able to make it out here today. I appreciate it.
Are we finished with our Morrow County?
Yeah, quick ones today, only 20 minutes per. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Would you like a copy of the slides as well? I can also.
Please.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Brandon, are you here for Sherman? Nope. Okay. Gotcha. Gonna wait 2 minutes more. And you can also ignore me, but for the sake of the recording, in case anyone is interested, I'm going to talk about Sherman County as well. Oops. Okay. Just to be on time with everyone, I will go through with Sherman County presenting the results for county projections for Sherman. If you're watching this and you were able to attend the day one, the structure will be very similar. We are going to go over a population overview and important demographics of compositions and how Sherman differs or is similar to the state. We're going to examine total population forecast first and look at trends of how we expect the population to change from 2020 to 2050. We're going to look at how births, deaths, and migration impact those total population forecasts, going over the components that we talked about on the first day. And then we're going to examine some population pyramids with an eye examining how population aging is impacting Sherman County, and then decompose the population change by race and ethnicity to look how diversity is changing among the county as well. So Sherman is a relatively small county in Oregon with a population who is the population who is under the age of 18 being 19.8% in Sherman compared to 20.3% across the whole of Oregon, so a little bit less. And the population who is age 65 plus being about 25.9%, a bit bigger than the 18.6% that we see in Oregon. So Sherman County is a little bit older than what we're seeing on average across the state. The population who is non-white is about 10.9% compared to 25.9% across the whole of Oregon. And the persons per household is about 2.01, so a little bit less or less dense persons per household than what we're seeing in Oregon State overall, 2.31. In terms of projections, we expect that that the Sherman population will grow before declining as population ages into the near future. This is a bit different than the last time we did these forecasts. So just to break this down again, our current population forecast are shown in the dark, and our last population forecast are shown in the dotted line with census data to the left and projections to the right of this horizontal, vertical line here. And so compared to what we anticipated to happen when we last made population projections, we anticipated continued decline in the population for Sherman. And what instead happened was about a 6% increase between the 2010 and 2020 census. So there was more growth in the county. There was growth in the county, which was different than what we had first anticipated, and we expect that to contribute to near-term population growth in the near future, mostly through migration, which we'll show. In terms of the number of births, we expect the number of births to continue to decline over time before eventually stabilizing at about 12 births per year annually into the future, as the TFR is expected to decline and stabilize at about 1.5, similar to the whole of the state of Oregon. Deaths will continue to increase over time as population both grows and ages. And this is in part due to a little bit stagnating life expectancy. Just because of some of the trends that we have seen within the county. We're anticipating that the mortality rates are going to be similar to what we've observed in the past, but not really increase. What's impacting the changes in deaths really is an increasing older age population, which we'll show in later slides. In terms of migration numbers, we're projecting the migration numbers to be consistently positive over time, and there's been a lot of variance in the past trends, with some 5-year cycles showing declines and some 5-year cycles showing increases over time, and that gets reflected a bit in the population of Sherman that we have seen in the past as well, where some years we have increases between censuses and some years we have decreases in censuses as well. So our best guess here in terms of what population migration is going to look like in the future is the average of what was observed in the past, and so that's about 10 individuals per year. Migration is generally skewed for the young throughout the working age population. So we see out migration from individuals who are 10 to 24, but after that, the 25 to 70-year-old group is who is in migrating. So they're making up a bulk of the population who is coming in and contributing to that population growth. We anticipate that, much like the rest of the state, that the Sherman population will continue to age as population grows before eventually declining. And so here, again, we're examining population pyramids, and this is exactly what we showed for the state, where the pyramid is from old ages to young ages. On the left-hand side is males, on the right-hand side is females, and we've colored this plot by generation. So we're going to cycle over time to show how this population pyramid changes and how the population composition by age has really shifted in Sherman. And so, as you can see, from 1970, we had a very young population, but by the time that we get to 2020, right, the population is quite a bit older, whereas most of the individuals, the bulk of the population, the median, the biggest group was young age individuals. That boomer generation has now aged and still represents a large portion of the population, but an older large portion of that population. And this is leading to why the individuals who are 65 plus are greater in Sherman County than the rest of the state. And we expect this pattern to continue into the forecast period. So just moving forward, and now these are our forecast. We expect continued population aging over time. And so here is now by 2050, we expect the population to be quite even a bit older, whereas it looked like we had a bit of the hump in the 60 to 64 age. Now we're anticipating, there to be like a consistent old age from 60 to 64 moving forward. And another way of examining this is by looking at the population who is 65 and older, which we're showing here. And we're expecting that to pretty dramatically increase over the next 10 years, jumping from 24.81% and 8% increase to 32.96, which is a little bit unprecedented for the county, but not at all unprecedented for what we're seeing in other locations that have had a similar demographic profile in the past as well. We've seen many other counties increase by 8 or 10% in terms of the population who is of retirement eligibility age 65 plus, and we're expecting that to happen in the near future for Sherman as well. And slight increases after that, but again, as the Gen X and the Boomer generations are aging, we're expecting that increase to happen in the near future. And by 2050, nearly 40% of the population in Sherman County will be age 65 and older. In terms of diversity, we expect diversity to increase over time, with slight increases for the Hispanic and Black populations over time, contributing to a more diverse Sherman moving from 2020 to 2050, although this diversity isn't growing at the same rate as the rest of the state. It's a bit slower, although we do expect these increases to happen. And I will leave it there and just say I know that people weren't able to make it for this one, but if you have questions and comments about these are our preliminary projections. I'm saying again, and if you have any questions about how we got these estimates, decompositions of like what's happening in terms of population change over time, or concerns about how we're making these projections, please feel to reach out to us at the email here. You can access the preliminary population projections at the website below. That also provides you with a link where you can respond to the housing and group quarter survey that we have, which we're able to incorporate into our UGB estimates, as well to accommodate changing population size for the cities and the UGBs moving forward, which we'll present on during the next regional meeting coming in February or March. And oops. I'll wait a couple of minutes. We're running a little bit early. Actually, run and grab water. Mind me for 1 second. Wait 1 more minute. Okay, gonna go ahead and get started on this section. So this is for Union County. Oops. We're going to be going over the regional forecast for Union County. If you were here or saw the presentation from day one, it's going to be a very similar structure for how we examine state population change, just now focused in on the county instead. So we're going to start with the high level population overview, examining some important demographic characteristics of the population and how those are similar or different for the county compared to the state. We're going to examine total population change and forecasts moving forward from 2020 to 2050. We're going to see how births, deaths, and migration have impacted that total population change over time, and how shifts in those things are impacting total population forecast. And then we're going to decompose our forecast by first by age, examining population pyramids, looking at how the population who is age 65 plus, the eligibility retirement age, is increasing over time, and also examining race ethnicity of our forecast, breaking down increasing or changing diversity of the county. So looking at Union County in comparison to the state of Oregon, Union County has a population of about 26,000, with 22% of the population being aged less than 18 compared to Oregon's 20.3%, and the population age 65 plus being 21.3 compared to 18.6%. The population who is non-white is 12.2% in Union compared to 25.9% for Oregon as a whole. And the persons per household ratio of the total population to the total number of housing units is 2.23 in Union, which is very similar to for the Oregon state average. When we are looking at population change over time, here are the past censuses shown left of this vertical line in the dark, and our future projections are on the right-hand side, moving from 2030, 2040 to 2050. And the dotted line is the projections for the population that we made during the last cycle. And so we can see that compared to the last cycle, that our population projection estimates are anticipated to be very similar to this time as well. And that our projections that we made last time were very close to what the actual 2020 census ended up being. So for those reasons, our population projections did not change that much, and what we're expecting to see is that Union County is going to grow at a grow over time, albeit at a slower rate as the population continues to age and fertility rates continue to decline over time, which we're expecting across the state as a whole. In terms of the number of births, we expect it to continue to decline over time, being stable between 250 and 300 births in the near future. And this is coming as the total fertility rate for the county has continued to decline over time, and we're expecting that to level off at about 1.4 for the county. The number of deaths will continue to increase over time, both as the population ages, but also grows, just because you have more people who are eligible of dying, and you have an older population, higher risk of deaths. We're going to expect to see an increase in the number of deaths across the state. This isn't to say that we're expecting life expectancy to decline. We've seen a bit of up and downs in terms of total life expectancy, but we're expecting in the near future for life expectancy to slightly decrease, but the gap between the state and the county to close over time. In terms of migration, we have seen inconsistent but generally positive in migration to the county. in the past 2 decades, and we expect that the general positive trend to increase over time, rather than estimating 1 year being inconsistently low and 1 year being inconsistently high. We have projected this just to be the average over time, and are expecting about a contribution of a little over 100 individuals annually migrating into the county, increasing the population size. This is mostly young and older age individuals who are coming into the state, and we do see a decrease in the number of 25 to 29-year-olds who are leaving the county. But again, migration is generally positive from what we've been observing in the past. We expect that the union population is growing and also aging in a similar way to other counties, and we are going to show that here in terms of a population pyramid. If you remember from yesterday, the population pyramid is showing both population size in terms of the total volume of the population pyramid, but also the changing age structures with old ages on the top and young ages at the bottom. And we've colored this by birth cohort, moving from the lost generation all the way up to through millennials, Gen Z, and then future generations of alpha and beta. And so we're going to start with 1970, and as in this pattern, you can see that the population in 1970 is relatively young, with young at the time boomer populations representing a large portion of the total Union County. And we can see how that shifts through different census periods over time, such that by 2020, right, the boomer generation is still representing a significant share of the total population, making older populations a much bigger contributor to the total population size than we had observed in the past. And we expect that trend to continue moving forward as well. So similar to how we saw the boomer generation move through and make up a significant portion of the 65 plus population through 2020 right here. We're expecting other generations as well to, in the future, contribute to a increasing older age population size. Here we're seeing now in 2050, this would be millennials now, representing a big share of the 65 plus population into the future. And so we can see that reflected in the changing population percentage of the population who is age 65 plus. And again, we're picking 65 plus here because this is the eligibility for retirement age currently in the US. And we saw that between the last census and this census, the 2010 and 2020 census, that there was almost a 5% increase in the population who is age 65 and older. And so this is a pretty big jump, and we expect there to be another jump in the next 10 years as the Gen X and the remainder of the Gen X generation ages moving forward. And increasing from 21% to 24%. And by 2050, we're going to expect a slowing in the growth of the population who's 65 plus, but them to represent more than a quarter of the total population for the county overall, which is pretty similar to a little bit higher than the rest of the state of Oregon, but unsurprising given that Union currently also has a population of 65 plus that is higher than the rest of the state. In terms of race and ethnicity, we anticipate that the population who is non-white will continue to increase over time for the county. Sort of interestingly, the population who identified as white is slightly declining between the 2010 and 2020 census. And we expect that decline to continue to happen specifically because of population aging, while the Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander populations are going to contribute disproportionately to the growth of the county and represent a bigger portion of the population. In terms of how much they represent in the total, right here, we see they're about a little over 10% of the population currently, and we expect that to increase to almost 20% by the time 2050 comes in. And I'm not sure if anyone is here for Union. I know we have a couple of people waiting for Umatilla. But if you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask me now. If people are watching this at a later date on the video recording, you can reach out to us with comments and questions at the email provided here. You can access these slides as well as projections at the website link provided below. They should be up by next week. And there you can also, if you haven't already, respond to the housing population survey. And that housing population survey is extremely important for us in making not just these projections, but also for the projections for the cities and urban growth boundaries, the UGBs as well. If there is no questions, I will hang on a bit because I know a few people are coming for Umatilla. So I'm gonna see if we can get other people on the call as well. Hmm. I think there's just one more person. Does anyone know by any chance um if Carla McLean is gonna be able to make it? I know she wanted to come to this one, but also she wasn't able to make it to an earlier one that she wanted to attend. I think I might just start just because I think there's a few people here, and I just want to leave time open for questions, and comments. Oh, it would help if I actually open the right slide deck. Okay, so this will be PSU's Population Research Center Region 2 meeting forecast for Umatilla County. This is our preliminary forecast estimates that we do in part to get feedback, insight to population patterns that everyone might be seeing on the ground and how we're incorporating data to make our population projections here. And if you were here yesterday for the state overview, this pattern is going to be, or how we're going to do it is very similar. Exactly the same, actually. We're going to do a high level population overview, comparing demographic characteristics that we think are important to population change, and how they compare in the county versus the state. Then we're going to show our total population forecast, what we're anticipating to happen in the near future for county growth or decline. Then we're going to examine how births, deaths, and migration contribute to that population change, and then decompose the population change, both by age, by examining population pyramids with specific eye, looking at the population who is eligible for retirement age 65 and older, as well as examining the diversity via race and ethnicity of the population and how we're anticipating that to change for the county through 2050. So looking at the population of Umatilla is about 80,000 individuals. It is the population who is age 0 to 17 is estimated as of the last 2020 census to be 24.9%. So this is younger than the state overall at 20.3%. And similarly, the population who is aged greater or 65 and older is 16.1%, again lower than the or younger than the Oregon state overall, who has a little bit higher percentage of the population who's 16 or 65 plus at 18.6%. The population who is non-white in Umatilla is about 35.9% compared to Oregon overall, that is higher, which Oregon overall has a 25.9%. Population who is non-whites, and the persons per household ratio is also higher for Umatilla than the state overall, coming in at about 2.54 individuals per household, whereas for the state of Oregon it is 2.31. And these are going to be important things to keep in mind, both for these forecasts as well as the city and UGB forecasts that we're doing in the next few months. So what are we expecting for population growth? We're expecting increases in the near future and a stabilizing of the Umatilla population over time, which is a little bit different than the last time we did these forecasts. We're going to show why, and I'm really interested in getting feedback from y'all as well, because I could definitely see a reason for setting this in so that it matches what we've had previously. Looking at births, we expect a bit of a decline in the total fertility rate over time. Historically, Umatilla has had a TFR that has been a little bit higher than the Oregon state overall. But we expect that recent past 5 years, there was a big decline, however, and the number of births that happened were below the state average. We expect a bounce back to that to happen, but it to be somewhere around hovering around the state average. In terms of total population contribution, this isn't the biggest factor in terms of like where population shifts are occurring and where it's different from last time that we made these forecasts. In terms of mortality, we're expecting a little bit more optimistic scenario compared to last time, where the number of deaths moving forward are a little bit lower than it was before, in line with the more optimistic trajectory of where population mortality rates have been heading. We saw a slight decline or a bit of a decline in life expectancy in the 2016 to 2020 period, but we're anticipating for there to be a bounce back to the slightly higher than the state average from what we saw before. By far the biggest difference in terms of contributing to population change is the way that we're expecting migration to change over time. Whereas in the prior forecast, which is shown in the outlined bars, we anticipated continuing increases in migration over time. Right now, we're forecasting a stabilized rate of about 200 average migrants coming into the county every year, which is going to lead to near-term growth, but as the population ages and mortalities increase and death rates increase, is going to lead to a drop-off or a stabilizing of the population. This is if you look at the past patterns of in-migration to the county, there has been a little bit across the board, some years high, some years low, but the average has been about 200 individuals. And this is what we're projecting. And again, this is slightly different from last time, where we were projecting a continued positive increase in the number of migrants who are coming in over time. So this is a little bit more conservative of an estimate. In terms of the migration count, a little bit all over the board. Out migration from young age individuals around college, going into college, but in migration coming in from younger families and young individuals and 20 to 24-year-olds in what we're seeing here. In terms of what this is leading to in as a population totals, we're going to examine this population pyramid. And here the thing to look out for is what we're showing with the population pyramid is both the total population in terms of the volume of the pyramid, as well as the shape of this, where old age populations are on the top and young age populations are on the bottom. And we're going to update this graph through the census periods 1970 through 2020, and then pause and look at it, and then look at the changes through the forecasting period. And the big thing that I want to comment here is that in 1970, Umatilla was very young, with the population who was aged 20 and below representing a disproportionate number of individuals. And at that time, that was the population who was rented, who was the boomer population at the time. And as we move forward, we can see how this has shifted over time. So going through 1990, 2000, 2010, and then 2020. And I just want to note a big shift in the way that this population has aged over time. Remember, this is still a relatively young population with regards to the rest of the state, but even compared to, whoops, deepest apologies, compared to 1970, when the population was very young, it looks very different. Now what we're seeing is a population who is pretty evenly distributed from the young age individuals to the older age individuals, about right here in this one, right? Now the biggest, the median, the highest population, the mode is about the 25 to 29-year-olds in the Gen Z millennial group. It's a bit of mixture of both of them. So we're anticipating this to also impact the population moving forward as well. So you're going to see continued aging in the population as the population grows as well, and fertility rates continue to decline. And so here you can see the impacts of declining fertility rates that are happening in the population as less and less of the population is made up of the young aged individuals, and more it becomes top heavy, which is a pattern that we're seeing in most counties as well. We just think Umatilla is a little bit, is not at that same level, but is moving towards that trajectory, moving in the coming years. Another way of looking at this is by examining the population who is age 65 plus, and I think this leads to a little bit more evidence that the population is aging in the county, and we expect that to happen moving forward. Between the 2010 census and the 2020 census, we saw about a 3 percentage point increase in the population who is age 65 plus. So although the population has really increased, the population who is older aged 65 plus is representing a bigger and bigger proportion of the population than what we've seen in the past. And as the boomer and Gen X populations continue to age, and eventually the millennials as well, we're expecting to see increases into 2030, 2040, and 2050 by 3 and then 1 and 2% moving forward. That by 2050, 1 in 5 individuals in the county will be age 65 and above. Note that for the state, we're anticipating 24 to 25% of the population to be age 65 plus, so still younger than compared to the state, but it is an population aging pattern that we're seeing just across counties in general, and we're expecting the state to move as a whole in that direction as well. In terms of diversity, we see some interesting patterns in terms of the population growth that is happening in the county. So this is the same chart that we saw in the first one, but now it's colored by race and ethnicity. And here we see that the population who is identified as white has been declining slightly from 2000 to 2020, and we expect that to continue to happen, as in this age group in particular is going to be aging quicker than other age groups, and a greater percentage of the population is going to be Hispanic. We saw some pretty dramatic increases in the past in terms of the population who is Hispanic representing a greater share of the total population, and we expect more modest increases going into the future, but still a continued growth of this group. Looking at this another way, we see that the share of the population who is non-white is continuing to increase over time. That's everything but the purple line, as the white population represents a smaller share of the total population. I want to leave enough time. We have about 8 or so minutes for questions, and more than and I just want to open it up for anyone who has questions and comments.
So this is Rob in Pendleton. Any questions that I might have had would be related to the recent report that I saw come out of Portland State that showed what current population estimates are. Do you have that information that you could share with us?
This is for the county, or are you talking for the UGB?
I'm talking for the UGB, different cities, particularly Pendleton. I'm interested in.
Yeah, so Ethan would probably be better to speak to that. Right now at this phase in this cycle, we're still early on terms of the UGB forecast, which are going to be coming in at the next meeting in March. But I think Ethan, if you're on the line, can speak to those estimates. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can folks hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah. So the issue you mentioned, Rob. I think there's a couple different things that can be going on. I think the first thing is that I'd encourage you to reach out to our estimates program lead. Her name is Huda Alkitkat. But you can reach us at askprc@pdx.edu, and we can probably talk through the estimates. There's a couple different things that could be related to what you're seeing. One would be, the use of the 2020 census benchmark. The second would be any revisions we might have made to last year in light of what we're seeing as countywide migration trends. And then the third is, related to the housing production and the county trends and how Pendleton fits in there. So we're in the review period. So this is exactly when we do want to hear back on those preliminary estimates. We'll continue doing that before we get to December 15th, when we will release the certified estimates. But so in terms of, Huda would be able to tell you what we had reported for the housing unit growth, construction and demolitions, and as well as kind of larger factors that we had to consider. Migration was, not as high as we had expected last year, and so there were a number of places where we saw growth did not meet our initial expectations, and so that could be a factor in play. But there are a couple of things too, so we can find out exactly, which data pieces might be most related to the question about Pendleton. The forecast program will release information about the Pendleton UGB, a new forecast, and that will come in a few months. Here we're kind of setting the ground in terms of what we're seeing at the county, because the UGB forecasts will all be done, but then will be adjusted so that there's consistency between the forecasts we do at the sub-county level to these county forecasts. So, a limited growth in Umatilla in the future would mean that, that would probably be felt in all of the UGBs, but not necessarily evenly.
So I didn't see in the presentation going to the county information. What I heard was a lot of talk about what the future holds, but I didn't hear or catch anything about what the current projected population for the county is. It seems like I saw some information. I saw an email come out. Am I correct in understanding that the population in the county has declined since last year?
I haven't got that number right in my mind, but yeah, you're right. So on November 15th, we just released new estimates for the July 1st, 2022 population of the county and cities. I'm sorry, but I don't know off the top of my head exactly where the county came in, but we do have that information published on the website under the estimates program. So the way the forecast program works, we jump off from the most recent estimates into the forecast period.
Yes.
But because the new estimates haven't yet been certified, Everything you're seeing here would be mostly still based on our knowledge from the 2020 census. So,
And
So go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
Oh,
go ahead.
yeah, I just pulled up some of the numbers that we do have. I know looking at census estimates for the county that they did estimate the population to decline from April 1st, 2020 to the latest 2021 estimates. So Ethan, I'm not sure if those numbers get incorporated or if you're operating with similar data and they've independently um, uh, estimated that.
yeah, we would have similar births and deaths data. Our migration assumptions are slightly different.
Okay.
In general, we tend, I think, summarizing what we saw over the past year was that we had a higher expectation of migration than did the Census Bureau. So we had less of a loss, I think is what I'm getting at. I picked a bad time to shut down my computer, so I'm going to open it back up and just see if I can pull up those numbers from our release on Tuesday to kind of ground the conversation.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute. So like just to clarify, Rob, because I know this is probably a little bit confusing, is that like the way that the forecast happen are separate from the estimates. They're deeply intertwined in terms of like using the estimates as a understanding of a jumping off point for the forecast. But we use like the trends in the past data to really like build off of for making the forecast. And so, yeah, it's a little bit different of a project for the estimates program. And we're, but you can still reach out to us into the same email if you have questions. And in particular, Huda, who Ethan had mentioned prior, is the lead for the population estimates program, whereas I'm the lead for the forecast program. But again, this is important for us to hear as well, even from a forecasting perspective, because those numbers inform also what we're using to make those projections, and we're expecting similar trends moving forward, hence the lower than last time migration that we're expecting to see moving forward compared to what happened last time when we made these projections, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, and to follow up, so I did get that information open, and you're right. So our best estimate is that the population of the county more or less remained constant since last year. We do have like a loss of 20 persons net at the county level, and that's less of a loss than the Census Bureau found, but a loss at the county level shouldn't necessarily mean a loss for cities. We do tend to see when a city has a loss, we distribute that. When a county has a loss, we do distribute it. Our initial assumption is to distribute it among the biggest jurisdictions in the county. So Hermiston would be affected, Pendleton would be affected. Also, the people living in unincorporated areas would take some of that. It is a small loss though. But I think that during this period, we do tweak that distribution of losses. I think in the past, we've tended to put all the losses in the balance of county with the assumption that when a county is losing population, it's probably the case that people are moving from unincorporated areas to the cities and also out of the county. We have seen a lot of counties actually still with a lot of housing production in the unincorporated areas. So we kind of stopped doing that. But we should have a follow-up conversation maybe after these presentations where we can kind of figure out exactly what the data we had on Pendleton were and kind of explain better how we got there. Once the numbers are certified, so even though the forecast numbers are a little different right now, when the forecast is finalized, we will have certified estimates for 2022. And so we will take the forecast and adjust it for consistency with our most recent estimates before we publish it. So it'll eliminate that discrepancy.
Okay, thank you.
Brandon, I saw that you unmuted for a second. Did you have a question or comment as well?
It was just kind of a follow-up to some of the stuff Rob was asking about. We've noticed a trend specifically on the census data, just because of the timing of when those counts were done and when the governor released some folks, specifically from Two Rivers Correctional Institute. You know, for a city of 8,000, having our census count done when they release 400 inmates is a pretty significant chunk of our population, obviously. So as we start to get into those UGB forecasts, I'll probably be advocating that some of those counts are gonna kind of disproportionately show that we didn't grow just because of the timing on when those counts took place for the census and when that prison population kind of bottomed out for really only a 6-month period. They're back up to their normal housing and numbers now. So that's just an interesting dynamic for us. I'm sure Pendleton had some of that with inmates being released due to COVID at that same time too. Just something I'll be looking at as we get into those UGB numbers.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I won't try to delay Neil too much longer, but I do want to address that a little bit because it came up yesterday too, and you're right. So the 2020 census took place under just extremely challenging circumstances, and a lot of the large group quarters around the state, whether they were student dorms, whether, you know, we're talking about the state hospital even, you know, just there were people discharged. And they were probably there on April 1st when the census is supposed to be making that estimate. But, you know, they just weren't there when the actual paperwork and the survey got to those group quarters administrators, which was in June or so on. So people probably just didn't fill it out exactly quite right. And we've been trying to kind of go case by case and find these group quarters and then do either one of two things. Either, you know, go back and adjust the base. So we can actually adjust the 2020 census in our own numbers to reflect the fact that there were actually more people there in 2020 than were counted in the census. That's one path. And then the second path is, you know, we can actually have that population drop and then come back. So we can put it in place in our estimates with a migration out and then a migration in. An example of where we've done that is, I think, like in Corvallis, you know, they had a couple thousand students leave the dorms and then come back. And so that's an option too. And we should follow up and talk about that because we do have a window of opportunity where we can not just correct our numbers, we can always do that, but we can actually also correct the census's numbers. If we know that there was a misreport on the group quarters, you know, they can make an adjustment for that. And I think we have until, you know, early next year to do that, maybe April 2023, I think. So I encourage you maybe to reach out to by email, and would love to see if we can help you with that, providing those data to the Census Bureau.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send something out and at least start that conversation. Like I said, at this point, I just kind of wanted to put it on your radar that I will probably bring that up a couple of times as we move through UGB numbers.
Good, thanks. Okay, Neil, back to you.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm just going to have to push so I don't want to make the next group wait for too long. Rob, do you have another comment or question? Really
no, I'm in the same boat. Our numbers. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. So totally. I appreciate your awareness of that.
Yeah. And it's something that we're definitely looking out for. Yeah. But like the more noise that we can hear, just because there has been such system-wide issues with like these counts, like if you can bring up particular instances and we can get that in an email or in writing in some way, it's a big help. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. I'm losing track of time at 11:20, right? We are on to Walla Walla. Okay. I'm already here. Okay. Sorry to keep y'all waiting. If you were here for Wallowa County population forecast, we're going to be going over the county forecast in a very similar way that we went through the state forecast, starting with a population overview, comparing important demographic characteristics of the county and how they compare to the state. Look at a total population projection of the county, and see how it compares to our last projections. Examine how births, deaths, and migration have impacted the total population estimates that we now have compared to previously. And then examine how the population is changing, both in terms of its age structure by examining population pyramids and looking at the population who is age 65 and older, that is retirement age and older, as well as an examination of the race and ethnicity decomposition of the population, both currently and then moving forward through our population projections. So Wallowa has a population of about 7,391. According to the last 2020 census, the population who is age 0 to 17 is estimated to be 19.8%, slightly lower than the 20.3% for the county, whereas the population who is age 65 plus is about 29.6%. More than 10 percentage points higher than the county or than the state overall. So Wallowa is a bit older, both in terms of having less under 18 and higher 65 plus population than the rest of the state. The population who is non-white is 7.8% for Wallowa compared to Oregon, which is 25.9%. And Wallowa has a person to housing ratio, which is a bit lower than Oregon as a whole, being 1.70 compared to 2.31. In terms of population projections, we think that Wallowa we're anticipating forecasting that Wallowa is going to slightly increase in the near future before declining in 2040 and 2050. Between the last census, 2010, and the current census 2020, we saw about a 5% increase in the total population, and that is pretty different than what we anticipated from our last forecast cycle, which is shown in these dotted lines over here. In the last forecast cycle, we estimated that there would be about a 1 to 2% population decline. What we saw was more in-migration than expected, and we expect that trend, that recent trend, to contribute to an increasing population in the next 10-year period as we move into the forecast, which is shown on the right of the dotted line, but that to eventually decline in total population as the population continues to age and mortality increases for the county as a whole. Looking at births, we do expect a decline in the number of births to happen before an eventual stabilization overall. And this is in line with what we see across most of the state. We're anticipating continued declines to happen. We've seen TFR decline across the county and the state, but eventually being lower in the county than the state in the most recent in 2020. And then we're expecting a bit of a rebound close to, so that the state resembles the county or the county resembles the state again, but there eventually to be a gap of about 0.1 in the TFR between the state and the county, and before the county levels off of about 1.4 children per women. We anticipate that deaths will continue to increase over time as the population both grows and continues to age. We expect that life expectancy is going to hit a rebound compared to what we saw in more recent years, based on earlier trajectories of mortality, leading to lower deaths than what we had seen in previous years. But by far the biggest difference that we see in terms of the population contribution is the annual number of migrants coming into the population, where we're anticipating about an average of 40 individuals per year forecasted into the future to come into the county. Historically, migration has generally been positive for the county, although there has been big shifts in 5-year time periods of some people leaving and some people entering. If you remember the slides from earlier, there was a decrease in the population between 2000 and 2010, largely from migration, and then an increase in the population again between 2010 and 2020 as a migration, just sort of highlighting that we have seen kind of swings in both ways of how migration has led to population change. So we took the average, and this is what we're anticipating moving forward, a little bit different from the continued increase in the population that we were projecting before, but ultimately still positive net contribution to the total population. In terms of the age distribution of individuals coming in, it's mostly younger working age and older working age populations who are migrating in, and we are seeing out migration from younger college age populations in the county. This gets all leads to a contribution of net aging for the population, which we can see reflected in this population pyramid. What we're going to show here is population pyramids changing over time, where a population pyramid shows the total population size in terms of the volume of the graph that you're looking at here, with men on the left-hand side and women on the right-hand side, and ages showed going from young ages on the bottom to old ages on the top. So for most of the counties, we see this similar pattern where young ages are very prevalent. In 1970, we have a disproportionate number of individuals being very young age compared to the older age population. And this was especially true in 1970s when the boomer generation was particularly large for the county. But as we go through the census period, we can see some of that change, especially as the boomer generation continues to age. They still represent a disproportionate percentage of the county, but they are now at a much older than they were before, right? So we still see that for Wallowa, the biggest population is the boomer generation, but they're now in that 60 to 80 age population range. And so this is what's leading to the county being a bit older than what we're seeing in the state overall. And basically what we're forecasting to continue forecasting is this pattern to continue to happen and seeing the population continue to age, right? There into 2040 and 2050, we see a large portion of the boomer population move beyond the population pyramid as they reach the high mortality ages, going from 2030 to 2040. And then by 2050, which we just missed on, we're expecting a much older population. And so another way of looking at this is by examining the population who is age 65 plus. And so what you can see here is on the left-hand side of the dotted line, the percentage of the population who is age 65 plus, as estimated from different census periods. And so between 2010 census period and the 2020 census period, the percentage of the population who is age 65 and older jumped from about 23.2% of the population to 29.28% of the population. So about a 6% increase. And we expect there to be about another 6% increase moving forward from 2020 to 2030 as the late boomers, as well as the late boomers and the Gen X population continue to age. And then by 2050, we expect 40% of the population to be age 65 plus, which is higher than what we're projecting for the state average to be in 2025 or 2050, which is 25%. Actually, currently Wallowa County has a higher rate than that now at 30% even. In terms of population diversity, we expect there to be slow but increasing diversity over time, especially as the Hispanic population continues to grow in the county. But an important population trend to notice here is that we're seeing is that declines in the total of the population who is considered white, and this is in particular driven by the fact that the white population is considerably older than the other populations that we're examining here. And so we're just going to have higher rates of mortality for these groups than other populations. Another way of looking at this is looking at the percentage of the population by different groups. And here we can also see that we're seeing increases in the percentage of the population who is non-white over time, although those increases are more modest than what we're seeing at the state level overall. I know that we probably don't have anyone here for this right now, but if you're watching this later. You can feel free to reach out to us about questions and comments about these population projections. Again, I want to remind everyone that these are the preliminary population projections that we're making, and we use your feedback as well on the surveys, the housing surveys, as well as feedback about this presentation in ways that we alter before we have the finalized population projections, which will go out in June of next year. Feel free to reach out to us by email or telephone shown here, and we'll also have these preliminary population projection estimates at the web link provided here, as well as a link to the survey which you're able to complete if you haven't completed already. We have a couple of minutes before the next one. Oh, whoops, I didn't update that appropriately. Gonna fix that. Okay. Oh, not share. Hey, Christina, how's it going? Don't know if you can hear me.
I know, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, that's good to hear. I'm glad that you can make it for some of this.
Yeah, I just jumped off from another meeting and immediately come to this one.
Oh, thank you.
I never I never been to any of the forecast meetings, so it's really interesting to see yeah, the forecast report
Yeah, totally.
and
Yeah.
get to know more counties.
Yeah, we had a pretty lively, I don't know if you got on here on time, but there was a pretty lively discussion for the Umatilla one as well, which I was excited about.
Oh yeah, I catch the last little bit of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly like what we're looking for when we're doing these forecasts, and that's great to hear that people are concerned and interested in them as well. It makes it feel like, oh yeah, this is really important to get right and to do well.
Yeah, I hope I can hear more, but I can definitely go back to watch this is recorded, right?
This is recorded, yeah.
Right.
And I didn't hear back specifically from anyone from Wheeler. So I'm just gonna get started now and go through it just so I can stop the recording, just in case anyone wants to go back and listen to this one. So I will do that now. So this is day 2 of the PSU Population Research Center Region 2 regional forecast meetings. In this section, we'll be going over Wheeler County population forecasts. This is our team, as we talked about yesterday. And if you were here yesterday for the presentation for the state level overview, it's going to be very similar to what we did in examining population change for the county. We're first going to do a population overview examining important demographic components of how the county is different and similar from the state in demographic composition. We're going to look at a total population projection for the county and how that differs from our last population projections. We're going to examine how births, deaths, and migration contribute to that overall total population change. examine changing total fertility rates, life expectancy, and migration of the population. And then we're going to examine population pyramids, looking at with an eye on composition of the population, looking at how population aging is happening in the county, as well as how changing race and ethnicity composition is happening within the county. So looking at Wheeler, Wheeler is a smaller county in the state with a population of about 1,451 individuals, according to the 2020 census. And it is made up of 14.1% individuals who are under the age of 18. That is a bit lower than what we're seeing at the than the state overall, which is 20.3%. The population who is age 65 and older, on the other hand, the age that's eligible for retirement is a bit higher, more than twice as high than the state, being 36.7% compared to 18.6%. In addition, the population who is non-white is 12.3% compared to 25.9% for the state overall. And the persons per household, as a measure of housing, population density per housing, is about 1.53, and that is a bit less than the ratio for the state overall, which is 2.31. Looking at population projections, we project that Wheeler's population, that's supposed to be decline in the near future. We saw a slight increase in the population since the last period. So everything on the left of the dotted line is a population estimate that came from the census, right? And everything to the right of that dotted line is our future population projections. And in the dotted lines is the projections that we made during our last cycle, which happened before the 2020 census came out. So that you can see that we estimated continued population decline moving forward. But that what actually happened was an slight increase in the population, less than 1% increase, but nevertheless an increase. And what happened was we had a more migration than expected, occurring into the county, leading to a slight population increase. And we expect that to damper some of the population decline that we expect to happen in the near future, but ultimately there is going to be continued population decline as the population continues to age. We're expecting births to continue to decline as the total fertility rate continues to decrease over time to about less than 10 births per year. We've had a fertility rate that has been a little bit unstable in terms of the total fertility rate that has happened within the county, but ultimately we're expecting a TFR to stabilize of around 1.2. The number of deaths will continue to increase over time as the population continues to grow. And based on past trends, we're expecting a slight decline in terms of the total life expectancy for the population. The population is still having a life expectancy which is greater than what is currently in Oregon right now, but based on more recent trends of age-specific mortality declines, we're expecting a bit of a decrease over time. What this is in terms of migration, more recently we saw a uptick in migration, which again contributed to this increase in the population above and beyond what we had initially expected between the census periods. And you can see that we were estimating last time about 4 or 5 migrants to come on annually into the county, and what actually happened was a migration count of almost about 20 individuals coming into the county. So way more people coming in. We don't expect this recent migration to be sustained. However, we do think that generally there's going to be positive migration coming into the county on the order of about 10 to 15 individuals per year. The age distribution of the county is a bit skewed towards migration into the county is skewed towards an older population. So though individuals are coming into the county, what we're seeing is that they tend to be an older age population that's increasing rather than a young age population that's really contributing to this. So this is going to account for an increase in the old age population moving forward as well. Higher numbers of individuals who are older age, both through aging, natural aging, but also through migration. And so this gets reflected a bit in terms of analyzing the population pyramid. So what we're going to show here is the changing population structure via population pyramids. Population pyramids show both the total population in terms of the volume of the pyramid, as well as the age structure of the population, where young ages are shown in the bottom and older ages are shown on the top, and 5-year age periods going from 0 to 4 up to 100 plus. And on the left-hand side, we have the male population. On the right-hand side, we have the female population. And each of these are colored by cohorts as well, so that we can see cohorts like the boomer and Gen X and millennial populations age over time. So we're starting in 1970 census, and we can see a bulk of the population is made up of the boomer population. And we can see that change pretty dramatically over time for Wheeler County, although the boomer generation tend to increase over time, seemingly through migration. And this is what we're saw in the last slide, where migration into the county was coming from older age populations, contributing to an increase in the 65 plus, and in particular the boomer generation. And that in 2020, the population who is aged less than 18 is a very small portion of the county, right? And we're expecting that to continue to happen over time as well. There to be continued population aging in a smaller percentage of the population. Oh, whoops, clicked the wrong one. To be under the age of 18 as well. So now we can start back at 1970 again and see how this pattern is reflected not just through the census years, through 2020, as we see here, but now moving into the forecast period. So these are going to be forecast estimates. And we just see a smaller and smaller percentage of the population being made up of young age individuals moving forward. Wheeler kind of represents an extreme in terms of this population pyramid. So if trends continue, this is what we expect to happen for the population. This is something where I would also, we as a team would love to hear about potential recent shifts in migration and what people within the county or the UGBs within the county think about population growth for the county. Because if trends continue with the low migration rates and an increasing aging population, we're going to just get a large portion of the population who is of higher age groups. And in fact, we're anticipating if trends continue for there to be not just a big increase again in the next 10-year period, jumping from 36.6% of the population who is age 65 plus to 48.72% of the population who is age 65 plus, but there to be continuing aging all the way up to 60% by 2050, 65 being 65 and older, which again is an outlier in terms of the counties that we're forecasting for. But if population trends continue, this is what we're expecting to happen. Diversity is slightly increasing over time as the white population continues to decline, a pattern that we've seen since 2000. Population growth in the county has largely been had because of increases in the Hispanic population. And we think that the Hispanic population will remain stable, relatively stable in terms of their contribution of population growth, but that the white population will continue to decline over time. And that's going to lead to an overall diversity, but that's driven more by white population decline rather than any population growth in particular of any of the other racial and ethnic groups that we're examining. if you have comments and questions about these projections, or in particular, if you have information about building or housing projects that are happening that could contribute to increases in migration in the coming years, or recent trends in migration in the coming years for the county, this is what we'd love to hear, either by email or preferably via the survey that is on our website that you can find and on the link below or on our website. You can get also links to these slides, as well as estimates, the preliminary population estimates, projections at the link below as well. And I do just want to reiterate that these are preliminary population projections. We're using this time period to incorporate feedback from the counties and the UGBs and the cities to tell us about trajectories that they have potentially seen, or new housing projects, or new developments, or new building permits that are happening in the area that might shift population change, in ways that we aren't accounting for here. So we would love to hear back from you.